This is also quite timely because there are a few girls doing the gauntlet, and shame ties up well with what they're going through and what they're working in on at this current moment. Okay, so you're using an external factor as your metric to criticize yourself, or judge or shame yourself, right?
Um,
All right.
Shame. I'm really bad with these definitions.
See, this is exactly that there's no fucking right definition. All it is what it means to you. And I want to make sure that you all have internally absorbed what this concept means to you, because that's all that matters in your future and how it works for you, right? This is not an academic class. There are no exams. Life is your test. And I want to make sure you can pass your own test by understanding how it's relevant to you. But that's exactly what you're saying is exactly what the definition is, right? And it's something that you start feeling internally. And sometimes there's something that triggers it or something that reminds you of something that you may have experienced or gone through that brings in those feelings, right? Abandonment, the potential fear of the rejection, because that ultimately starts inducing this feeling of I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough. And that happens because you were abandoned once before. Now, let me come get one step closer. Why would someone want to induce that fear of abandonment or the fear of rejection into us? Because shame is not taught to a child, it's not taught to a little being. It's induced in a little being. And it can only be induced in a little being from the external world. So shame is when we internally judge or criticize ourselves for not meeting an external, could be now internal, expectation. By the way, it can also be classmates. It can also be social circles. We experience a lot of shame and judgment when we don't fit in with somebody else, right? Where we don't fit in with, let's say, if we, for whatever reason, dressed a certain way or had a learning, retardation, which is basically just a slow learning thing, or maybe we had a speech difficulty, or maybe we walked funny or played funny or did something. Now, I want to come into a very fundamental difference between the concept of guilt and shame. Guilt is actually a subconscious behavior which is meant to just be corrective and temporary. For example, I miss my alarm. So make it on time. Something's wrong with me, or like, why am I like this? Blah, blah, blah. You start shaming yourself. And shame becomes, as someone said, more of an identity. It's no longer at this point just a particular feeling. It now becomes an identity that I am bad. I am not good enough. I am not worthy. Now, one of the things about shame, especially when we're giving it to ourselves, is it carries an extremely low vibration. You cannot offer or receive love when you're in a place of shame. In fact, it's easier to give or receive some kind of love and connection when you're in a place of anger than it is when you're in a place of shame. Because when you're in a place of shame, it is the most contractive, self-defeated um, partner. And then it was my friendships. My best friends with like who I had gone to boarding school with. I grew up with them since I was 8 years old. They didn't want to be associated with a guy like me. 100% fair. But I started to feel so bad and judge myself and feel so ashamed about what I did to everybody that for 2 or 3 years, that's what took me to such a suicidal place. That I'm such a bad thing in this world, that I can cause so much harm, that I am not worthy at all of anybody's love. It didn't help me at all. And when I did that, the floodgates opened. All of the stuff of like being lonely, of not feeling loved, of feeling so isolated, my childhood trauma constantly coming up, my desperate need for validation from women because my mom wasn't really there for me and gave me validation. All of that came up. And when I saw that list without judgment, I truly understood why he did what he did. And then I had so much compassion for this guy. It's about trying to release all the stuff we're doing to ourselves. I had a client who came to me once. I had a client who called me from a suicide detention center. And she said, I'd like to do the gauntlet. And she was under such strict guidance, and like this was her third attempt. So there was obviously a lot of pressure. So I spoke to her and I said, see, if you want to come into this group, here are the conditions, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I'll do anything because I've gone everywhere and it hasn't worked. When I can tell you that the only thing keeping that woman in that detention center was the monster of shame living on her shoulder, then that means that everything else that she was doing in her life, it wasn't bad. It wasn't something that she did disastrous. She wasn't like inflicted by such like, great wounds of a certain sort, but the shame that she was such a small, bad, individual that didn't deserve to live on this planet, that was like looming over her. And when she finally understood this concept that like my shame doesn't have to be met by, listen to this, someone else's forgiveness, but instead it has to be met by my own understanding, compassion, and forgiveness, then the monster started to chip away. I'm going to repeat this again. Your shame does not need to be met by anyone else's forgiveness. That's how shame continues to brood, to breed, to live, is that when we feel shame, we think we need the world's forgiveness. And it continues to grow. In fact, that's the worst belief. Whereas the only person's understanding, compassion, and forgiveness you need is your own. And then shame starts to recede and it starts to fall away. A good ending to that story, however, is that woman who was there is now extremely happy in her life, married with 3 kids, changed her job, has gone to live in the woods somewhere in California. It's such a beautiful, miraculous story of the biggest wound that she had that no one cared to give time for. It wasn't that she genetically or had this like tendency she wanted to kill herself, or that she was addicted to these particular things. It was a shame she carried from like somewhere in her life. So now let's get into a formula for dismantling shame. Okay. Now, if you've studied resentment and you've studied resentment with me, you'll know that understanding is one of the key things, right? That helps us release resentment, that helps us release our expectations of somebody else who's failed us. Shame is the internal version of resentment, it's the internal projection. I'm going to give you a formula. So the first thing that you need, it's a 5-step formula. The first thing that you need when you feel like you're experiencing something with shame is the sense of awareness. Okay. You need to actually be aware of what it is you're carrying the shame for, because something shame does is it so quickly goes from I did this particular thing to I am this particular thing. I am bad. I am not worthy. Now you've lost the awareness of what's actually causing the shame. And instead you're allowing the monster to just keep shitting on you, judging you, making you feel small. Okay. So the first thing is bring yourself back to your awareness. Do your best to understand, why am I feeling the shame right now? It could be because I cheated on someone, or it could be because I failed this particular thing that I've been practicing so long to try and pass and do and whatever else, It could be because I've broken a commitment with someone, any of those particular things. Go to the why first. That's the awareness, okay? The second step, this is extremely important, is non-judgment. If you are already judging this thing, so as it's coming to awareness, if you're going to be like your caretakers, your religious teachers, or anybody else, and you're judging yourself that for the thing you did, you've already failed. That's basically adding to shame. So you need non-judgment. Whatever you need to do to get to that place of non-judgment, do it. If you need to go for a walk, you need to break the pattern of, they get angry when they want